My go-to Ibispaint brush was pencil graphite, emphasis on was. In my last post, Buggy Morty commented that they're using pencil graphite because I made a video about it. Well, Buggy Morty, things have changed. The best Ibispaint brush is flat, watercolor, opaque, and let me tell you why. Full disclaimer, this video is based on my opinion and experience. Yours might be different, might be similar. Either way, sit back and listen while Grandma Fong yaps about brushes and possibly other things. Enjoy! The first reason why flat watercolor opaque is the best brush is that it's not a custom brush, which means you can just scroll down in the Ibispaint brush library and then you'll find the flat watercolor opaque brush. Or you can also click on the magnifying glass and then just type in flat watercolor and then it will show up. You might notice that there is also flat watercolor opaque too. I have tried it and it sucks. This is the difference between flat watercolor opaque, the original one, and flat watercolor opaque 2. They're both at full opacity, but flat watercolor opaque 2 is very thin and see-through. It's really soft, so there is no visible texture. This might be useful for blending, but on a low opacity, flat watercolor opaque can also be used for blending. So do whatever you think is comfortable, but I will stick with the flat watercolor opaque, the original one. I will talk more about the brush as the drawing progresses. As you can tell from the thumbnail, today I'm drawing Flins. I've been wanting to draw him ever since that Nod-Krai teaser, and many of you guys requested him, so here he is. I wanted to draw a thirst trap of him at first, but I realized that I can't run from drawing detailed clothes forever. But that doesn't mean I won't draw any Flins thirst traps after this. I'm still very much dehydrated. Anyway, for the rough sketch, I used the brush in full opacity and small size. Not too small though, this is just a very rough sketch. Around 18 to 20 pixels is perfect for me. For the clean sketch, I switched the color to dark brown and set the layer to multiply so it looks sharper and darker. I set the size even smaller, at around 6 pixels so it's tidier. The thing I love about flat watercolor opaque is the versatility. It's really hard to say. It can look very rough like the first sketch, but it can also achieve a tidy and neat look. Of course, not as tidy as an actual line art brush like glass pen, but more like a loose, sketchy line art. Some brushes tend to break when you use it in a small size, but this might also be the problem with the drawing app. So far, most Ibispaint brushes still work well even if they're really small. If you notice, some of my brush strokes are thicker even though I'm using the same size. So the thickness for this brush is depending on the pressure you put on your screen. The more you press your pen against the screen, the thicker it is. By the way, if any of you still ask what my brush is in this video or in another video after this one, I swear to everything holy, a mosquito will stick its little tiny needle mouth in the sole of your feet. So every time you scratch, you will tickle yourself over and over and over. That'll teach you about asking about my brush. Anyway, so this is the setting for my flat watercolor opaque brush. I remember playing around with the setting, I just don't remember what I changed. So I will just click on it and scroll real slow. If you want your brush to behave like mine, you can pause and screenshot. Sorry, was I going too fast? I will scroll really slowly. Or you can just slow the video down. This jitter. Brush type, there's mono, water, double. I don't know what any of that means, so I will just scroll, then move on to the dynamic and then settings. Also, the name flat watercolor opaque is kind of long, isn't it? It's kind of a hassle to say. Let's shorten it to flower flower opaque. No. Maybe just took the initials like FWO. FWO. This brush is called FWO. FWO. Let's call it FWO. Before we talk more about how great FWO is, I want to show you one of its weaknesses. So we have this line art and let's try adding the base color using the FWO. Okay, it looks fine. right? Doesn't look like there's anything wrong with it. But if we use a dark background underneath it, you can see how it's kind of like patchy. Some of the parts are not fully covered. It's a bit transparent. It might look fine because the color is really pale, but when you shade it, it becomes more patchy because the color is even clearer now. Of course, there's always the paint bucket tool for base color, but use a solid brush to cover up any holes instead of the FWO brush. For soft shadows, I use an airbrush and a multiply. This adds volume to the drawing and acts as a base before we're using the FWO. I made another multiply layer and used the FWO in lower opacity. Don't lower it too much though, we're not blending anything yet. This is just mapping out the hard shadows. I use much lower opacity for the face though because Flins' skin tone seems to be very pale, like a vampire. He's not a vampire though, or at least I hope he wasn't. You know it sucks being a vampire, right? They can't eat garlic bread. What good is immortality if you can't eat garlic bread? I saw that joke from Twitter years ago. FWO has faded tips. Thanks to them, the hard shadows are not too sharp like cell shading, and it adds variation to the shadows, darker in the middle, lighter nearing the edge. I always use muted colors until my painting is about 80% done. Muted colors are easier to control and you can easily add more saturated colors later on. Now we're moving on to the rendering, or painting over the sketch. Still using the FWO, that's how versatile this brush is. Sketching, line art, rendering, got it all covered. Well, except for soft shadows and base color. I always use lower opacity during rendering, especially on the face. Around 60 to 70% opacity works great. However, I use higher or even full opacity when rendering hair and clothes because they can easily lose texture. Add darker color to the shadows if it's too light and loses definition. Flins' skin is pale but it's not flat. I usually add darker colors on the side of the nose, upper lip, below the lower lip, the under eye, and neck. For blending, I used an even lower opacity and combine it with the midtones. I don't recommend using the smudge tool because it's too blurry. In case some of you are confused, let me explain using the circle. I have applied the airbrush for the circle and let's lower the opacity for the FWO and let's apply some shading. Now if you look closely, there is this color between the light color and the darker color. This color in the middle is called the midtones. Let's take this color and then lower the opacity again and then blend the circle. See how it adds softness and also volume? This is the method that I always use whenever I'm shading, especially when shading skin. The great thing about this method is that you don't lose all the texture while blending the colors because you're using the midtones and also the low opacity brush. If you're using the smudge tool, it erases all the lovely texture you just made. And I don't like that. Just change the smudge brush. I know, but I can just use the FWO to blend. I don't have to switch to smudge or anything. But you can use it if you like though. Like, who am I to tell you? I'm not your mother. For rendering clothes, I use full opacity like I mentioned. Since the brush is a bit transparent, you can still get midtones. Even at full opacity, it's just gonna be darker. Same thing for accessories. It appears that Flint's got a lot of medals in his outfit. Is it not heavy for you to be walking around with that many medals, my dear boy? Anyway, medals have strong lighting because they're shiny and reflect a lot of light, so always use full opacity for it. Fortunately, Flins' accessories are quite big, so I can keep using the FWO brush. However, because of its slight transparency and faded tips, it's harder to draw very small accessories with it. But for this size, it still works great. Every time I draw a character with detailed outfits, I have to render the outfits first. Well, I mean, I did render the face first, but quickly jumped into the clothes. If I fully render the face from the get-go, make it pretty, make it look nice, I won't have any energy left to render everything else. But I think we can go back to the face for now. I will color the eyes for a bit, nothing special here. I think Flins is the first Genshin characters with blank eyes. Nahida and Hutao have flowers, Furina have water drops, a lot of Genshin men have diamond pupils. Flins' eyes are just blank. Don't get me wrong, it's very in character, but it's kinda hard to make it realistic because he has no pupils. Yeah, it's actually harder to render blank eyes. For now, I will just outline the iris so it doesn't blend with the rest of the eyeball. Anyway, let's move on to hair. This is actually why I fell in love with FWO in the first place. I was looking for a brush to paint hair, and this brush was a lifesaver. If you look closely at the brush, it has a texture that mimics hair strands. It's a bit rough, so you might need to blend more or use the FWO2 if you like smoother looking hair, but I like it as it is. As I mentioned, I use full opacity for hair because it loses definition quickly as you blend. The size I used is around 70 to 30 pixels, sometimes bigger for shading, and sometimes much smaller for adding darker shadows and hair strands. If you guys are distracted by Flins' beautiful face, here, let me explain using just a portion of his hair. Can you guess which part this is? I use a big brush to shade and use a much smaller size and darker color, almost pure black for Flins' hair, to add shadows so it looks like the hair is overlapping. I also used the small size to add more strands to the highlight. And that's how I use the brush to render the hair. The rest is just repetition and brush strokes and practice and hard work and blood and sweat and tears. Oh shit, I just realized I colored Flins' hair wrong. It's supposed to be lighter at the bottom. Okay, let me fix his hair color and I will get back to you. Hey yo, Grandma is back. Okay, before we move on, if you click on this vibrating finger thing, there is an option called Force Fade. I'm not gonna pretend I know what that is, so let me just show you. So this is flat watercolor opaque without the Force Fade. Now we turn on the Force Fade, and this is what happens. As you can see, the tips fade even more. This is really useful when drawing something really thin like eyelashes and if you'd like a more detailed and realistic looking eyebrows. But other than that, I never turn it on. It's kinda annoying when shading something big. I will draw the lower lashes in another layer because as small as they are, if you screw up, it's a fucking hassle to fix. And also add the lower lashes shadow for an extra stylized look. The painting's almost done. It's like 90% done. I don't show you the full drawing progress because this is not a drawing process video. This is more focused on the flat watercolor opaque brush that I really like. I will make another drawing process and also rendering video in the future. I don't know when, but maybe in the near future. Stay tuned. All that's left is color adjustments with the blending modes and apply some filters. At this stage, I no longer use the flat watercolor opaque brush, but actually I did to add some of the background colors to Flins so it doesn't look like I just slapped Flins in the dark purple background. This method is similar to the hidden color method I talked about in the past video. You can check that out after this. And yeah, let me know what you think about the brush. Have you tried it? Are you planning to try it? Or if you think it looks ugly? Let me know all that in the comments. I'm gonna look for references to draw thirst trap for Flins and also Farka. And that's about it. Bye!